yes or no, as a main author of Project 2025, are you aware of this fourth pillar playbook?
Well, to be
Yes or no?
to be clear, I'm here in my official capacity.
Yes or no?
So I don't want to have any confusion
I'm reclaiming
on that.
my time. You are under oath, and I don't want you to filibuster. Yes or no, are you aware of this fourth pillar playbook?
Okay, just so I can be clear, that writing that I did was in my personal capacity after getting the...
Reclaiming my time, I didn't ask you that. Are you aware of the fourth pillar playbook, and can you detail, as you are under oath, what exactly it calls for?
Again, I've not seen this fourth pillar playbook that you're talking about.
Moving on. I find it hard to believe that you don't know the details of this 100. Well, please, you are under oath, and do not waste my or the public's time.
I'm happy to talk about all of the policy ideas that I've talked about. I've talked about them in that context. I've talked about them otherwise.
I want to talk about the 100-day playbook, the fourth pillar. Can you elucidate us to that?
Again,
All right, I'm moving on, sir. Mr. Berry, Chapter 18 of the Project 2025 manifesto is about the Department of Labor. And you are the author of that chapter, correct?
Lead author, yes. There's others too.
Yes, you are. I believe the American public should know exactly how you and the Republican majority that invited you to testify today want to sabotage the EEOC, rewrite the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and push all of us back to an era of Jim Crow racism. I'm shocked that my colleague across the aisle was in disbelief at our characterizations and assertions of racism and discrimination when even former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said the Republican side of the aisle looked like the most restrictive country club in America. We all know that Make America Great Again is about making America white only again. There is not one woman on this panel, and I almost walked out just on the strength of that. But the only reason why I didn't is because that is a systemic issue here in Congress and often for people who come before this committee. And if you don't have one woman in a position of leadership and authority that should be there, then that is also a problem. But again, women, hundreds of women, the report detailed hundreds of women who experienced harassment with no recourse. For over a decade, the FDIC, under your leadership and your predecessors, ignored them. Chair Gruenberg, in November, in fact, not that long ago, you stated that the FDIC already has, quote, appropriate policies and procedures in place, unquote. Do you now agree, and this is a yes or no question, I'm serious, do you now agree that the policies and procedures in place have been a cataclysmic failure and an affront to the many women who have been harassed, pushed out of the FDIC, and forced to change their career goals and life trajectory?
They have failed, yes, Congresswoman.
DEI is a huge step backwards for our country. It has taken generations, not to mention a civil war, a civil rights movement, to move past a stain on our nation's history. But we have made tremendous progress. But to codify discrimination in an effort to remove discrimination is a woeful initiative and would undo generations of progress we have made as a nation on this. Every tear, every drop of blood, the sweat of our founders, our forefathers that have fallen would be in vain for us to continue and to reverse the path that we have.
We are debating legislation that denies the sky is blue, water is wet, and racism is real. The major provision of the bill says to ban anything that acknowledges racism. And a few pages later in the exact same bill, there are multiple provisions discussing the presence of racism. This Republican approach is as predictable as it is nonsensical. On one hand, they're saying that racism does not exist. On the other hand, they are saying there is rampant reverse racism. Well, how do you reverse something that never existed in the first place? Riddle me that. While this Republican policy may have a new name, it's the same old tired game. Look, y'all are entitled to your opinions, but not a denial of the facts. Colleagues across the aisle have waged an all-out war on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm not sure if it's that they just hate one aspect of it, like diversity, or if it's the combination of all three.
So there's this September 5th, 2023 piece in Air and Space Force magazine, and it's titled in part, "Why Diversity Should Scare the Hell Out of Our Adversaries." And I've never seen the fear in someone's eye when they're confronted with diversity, but
I think part of this DEI stuff, insofar as we insert it in younger children, implies that if you're not of European ancestry, you're not going to do as well in this country.
Is it worth funding the DEI programs in the military? What good has it brought to the military? We have the biggest recruitment crisis that we've ever had. That is a fact. And I believe that the DEI programs and the politicization of our military is another big reason why.
It is no surprise that the same people complaining about DEI are the same people who complained about the Me Too movement, about Black Lives Matter, about the ERA, about the gay rights movement, and so much more. The fact that as soon as someone who is Black or gay has a disability earns a promotion, Republicans complain that they are unqualified and begin ranting about how diversity, equity, and inclusion is ruining the country. It's shameful, it's untrue, it's discriminatory, and we must not back down in our efforts to create a nation that respects all people. Might I add that the opposition is majority overwhelmingly white and male. I have a teenage daughter, and we like to play a game called Two Truths and a Lie. So if you'll indulge me, we're going to do some variation of that right now. I want to use my platform to clarify some of this disinformation by playing a game called Fact or Fiction. Dr. Caleb, I'll say a statement, and you'll reply with just one word stating if it is fact or fiction. Let's start with this. Fact or fiction? The FDA conducted a rigorous review of extensive research on mifepristone. Correct, that's a fact. Mifepristone has been on the market for almost 24 years, and more than 100 studies have affirmed its safety since. Fact or fiction? Judges know better than public health experts if medication abortion is safe.
Because the Supreme Court is currently adjudicating a case that involves it. But I am on record, and so are all of us, that it would be bad for the entire system of drug development and availability of medications in the United States if judges begin overruling the FDA as a matter of routine.
Thank you. So that's fiction. The FDA, not the courts, determines the safety of drugs. Fact or fiction? Mifepristone as a form of medication abortion is safe and effective.
Fact.
Correct, that's fact. Research shows that less than 1% of patients experience serious side effects, posing fewer risks even than Advil or Tylenol. The facts are adding up. Mifepristone is a safe, effective, and routine form of health care that remains necessary and legal across the nation. Now, this may be a game for today's hearing, but unlike Republicans, I have no interest in playing games with people's lives. And this is gravely serious. For many, especially Black women, pregnancy and childbirth can be life-threatening. One of my constituents, a mother, shared her story of how she was forced to go through a step therapy to treat her neurological condition and saw her condition worsen as a result, to the point where she spent a year relearning how to walk. And her story is no anomaly. Step therapy is not just ruining people's lives, it is killing them. Families have been robbed of their loved ones due to the delays, the greed, and harmful policies of PBMs. Mr. Joyner, CVS Caremark is one of the largest PBMs operating within my district. What do you say to my constituents who have been harmed by denying them the medical care that they need and deserve?
Congresswoman, I don't have the specific details of what you're referencing, but I certainly do understand and look specifically at ways in which we can improve the prior authorization process.
Are you sorry?
No, I think it's an important part of the healthcare system is to make sure that we're looking at our customers hold us accountable and look to make sure we have oversight for both patient safety. They're also focusing on ways in which we can improve adherence to the therapy, because if they're not staying on therapy, obviously, then there's
reclaiming my time. I wish you were sorry. You should be. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. You know, although the subject matter of today's hearing is to be expected, it certainly makes it no less offensive or frightening. My Republican colleagues very often like to quote Dr. King, I don't know, maybe for some faux civil rights credibility or to pervert his words to suit your extremist needs, while working actively to undermine his legislative legacy. On the first page of Chapter 18, Project 2025 complains about how the Biden administration has been fighting for racial equity. On the next page, it calls for eliminating data collection on race and ethnicity in employment. On the page after that, it calls for rescinding an executive order signed in 1965 that prohibits discrimination in hiring by contractors. Mr. Berry, do these terrible ideas sound familiar?
They're great ideas.
These terrible ideas sound familiar? Of course they do. You came up with them. Mr. Berry, I find it shameful to advance a vision attacking the very policies and agencies that have helped Black Americans secure jobs, earn a living, and provide for our families. This Project 2025 plan is policy violence, plain and simple. Its authors have placed such a large target on the EOC because of the incredible work the EOC is doing today. Last year alone, the agency filed more than 27,000 charges of race-based discrimination. These workers and their families have a pathway to justice, accountability, and healing because of the policies and regulations that Project 2025 is trying to get rid of. Ms. Wiley, how would workers be harmed by Project 2025's commitment to undermining crucial protections that are enforced by EOC and other federal agencies?
Well, essentially, it guts the ability to both be able to have the rights and have enforcement and protection of the rights that we already have, and we've been seeing improvements and advancements when we have been enforcing them. And I'm also deeply concerned with any suggestion that we should not be collecting data or that labor rights, the rights to organize, which has been so important for workers across race, including white men, to ensure that they're getting fair wages and safe working conditions. All of these are actually in that chapter, and they threaten our workplaces for people who are white, for people of color, for people of all backgrounds in this country. And I think that's why we all need to be concerned, because it really is about all of us.
That's right. They threaten our workplaces for every person who calls this country home. EOC offers essential protections that create workplaces where all of us can thrive, but Project 2025 aspires to be the realization of a decades-long crusade by Republicans to strip away this key pillar of the Civil Rights Act. As a founding member of the Stop Project 2025 Task Force, I look forward to showing and telling the American people exactly who you are, Mr. Berry, along with your extremist friends. I urge my colleagues to join me in building the inclusive world we know to be possible, one in which everyone, is there something funny?
No.
I didn't think so. Nothing funny about this. And in honor of my departed mother and for my 15-year-old daughter, I will do everything possible to stop you from building the world that you were hell-bent on doing. I urge my colleagues to join me in building the inclusive world we know to be possible, one in which everyone can show up to work free from discrimination. Thank you. I yield back. You know, this would all be funny if it wasn't so devastating. At a time when the leader of the Republican Party is trying to claim that he has no connection whatsoever to Project 2025, an outright lie, another lie like the one that he spews daily about Haitian Americans in Springfield, Ohio. Again, the leader of the Republican Party is trying to claim that he has no connection whatsoever to Project 2025, an outright lie. Our Republican colleagues have invited 4 of the manifesto's architects to testify today. I'm over here. In a desperate attempt to erase all of the ways that the American public has benefited from the Biden-Harris administration, this committee has instead spotlighted what Project 2025 would offer: chaos and corruption. However, we would be ignoring a critical component of Project 2025 if we did not address the fact that its creators have been secretly peddling a, quote, 100-day playbook, unquote, that contains executive orders and emergency actions to roll out in the first hours of a second Trump presidency. Instead of sharing this plan with the public, an indictment of your dangerous policy plans in and of itself, those behind Project 2025 claim it is too controversial to release. Ms. Guna Sakara, yes or no? As a main author of Project 2025, are you aware of this playbook or quote-unquote fourth pillar? And remember, you are under oath.
Yeah, and it's online on the website.
Can you please detail what exactly it calls for?
I think you explained it pretty well. It is a plan of action so that when Republicans and conservatives have another chance at a next administration, there's not lost time, and so that there is a plan ready to go.
I don't know if that was specific enough. You are under oath. Can you please detail what exactly it calls for, this fourth pillar, this 180-day playbook? Please detail what it calls for.
Again, I'd reiterate what I just said, that I think you summarized it quite well. It includes a plan of action on day one so that
But you didn't
Republicans...
say anything, and that's the problem. What is the plan of action?
It's to institute a more conservative vision on things that the American people want, because they're experiencing all of these hardships caused by the chaos and corruption of the Biden-Harris administration.
Reclaiming my time. I find it hard to believe that you don't know details of the 100-day playbook, but there's one person that definitely knows. Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, and that is why as co-founder of the Stop Project 2025 Task Force, alongside Representative Jared Huffman and dozens of our colleagues, we sent a letter to Mr. Roberts requesting he testify before Congress and release this 180-day playbook. We sent this letter on August 8th. The next day, he delayed his book launch, went into hiding. Kevin Roberts, what are you so afraid of? I am disappointed but unsurprised that the authors and leaders of Project 2025 are hiding their 180-day playbook. So today, Congressman Huffman and I are announcing a new, fully confidential tip line. Any person can visit huffman.house.gov/tip-line-form to submit any information you have about the secret playbook behind Project 2025. That goes for conservatives with a change of heart, workers at the Heritage Foundation, and our witnesses here today, who will perhaps find more courage when the cameras are off. I yield. This Republican majority has demonstrated it's out of touch with the priorities of everyday people, and has focused its effort on passing legislation and budgets to undermine DEI and entrench systemic discrimination against people of color, folks with disabilities, and other marginalized groups. Republicans sought to defund the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Education, which is essential to confronting the rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia impacting our students. Republicans voted to stop the hiring of DEI personnel in the military, despite evidence that it will improve military readiness. And Republicans consistently use harmful rhetoric at every opportunity to undermine the talent, knowledge, skills, and the training of professionals in every sector where DEI initiatives exist. And they often pervert, mischaracterize, and weaponize the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., despite the fact that his surviving children have repeatedly asked them to cease and desist from doing so. Now, President Biden signed a historic executive order on his first day in office to take a whole-of-government approach that embodies equity in the administration's work to ensure all people benefit, not just the wealthy and well-connected. Mr. Miller, the Office of Management and Budget plays an outsized role in implementing and overseeing the executive orders on equity. Can you explain why equity is an important part of performance goals for agencies?
Thank you, Congresswoman. And there was a phrase that you used that is central to explaining it, is that government should work for all Americans. So one example of something that we are doing is around accessibility associated with government services. We have many government digital websites and services where it's hard for some people, including disabled individuals, to access those government services, and we're working to improve that. Our services aren't working if they're not serving all of America.
Very good. I agree. What is an example of how President Biden's executive order on equity has helped folks across the country?
Well, one of the things that we have done is to broaden and discussed in this hearing the way in which we are utilizing federal financial assistance to reach more broadly into communities, to improve performance of the dollars, to make sure that community-based organizations that might otherwise not have applied for federal funds are able to access those funds and better deliver because they are closer to those in their community. That means better results, that means more efficiency, and frankly, that means less waste on useless overhead.
Thank you. The executive order, this is truly a first of its kind. I'm proud to partner with Ranking Member Raskin on legislation to codify key aspects into law so that they will exist in perpetuity. The truth is that America needs DEI to disrupt systems of oppression that are active in every facet of our society. DEI initiatives are how we combat white supremacy, anti-Semitism, ableism, sexism, transphobia, and more. In the face of this opposition, I applaud those who are committed to doing this work, from college presidents, corporate executives, to community organizers and academic researchers, and to those who are against DEI. I would love to know really what you are so afraid of. What are you so threatened by? Thank you. I yield. Thank you, Commissioner, for joining us today. First, let me just also acknowledge and thank you for your responsiveness and your swift action on my outreach to you regarding formaldehyde and chemical hair relaxers, also the shortage of children's Tylenol and Motrin. Personally, as someone living with alopecia totalis, I also appreciate your efforts in that regard. And finally, for the purposes of my question line today, reproductive justice. Dr. Califf, last year the FDA took pivotal steps to protect medication abortion access, including by allowing abortion pills to be prescribed by telehealth and distributed by retail pharmacies. Medication abortions accounted for 63% of all abortions performed in the United States last year. If mifepristone is pulled from the market, access to routine medical care would be jeopardized for people across the country. As part of their draconian, unpopular goal for a national abortion ban, let's call it what that is, forced birth, which for many will result in forced death, Republicans continue to try to block access to medications like mifepristone by spreading baseless conspiracy theories. The fake news is rampant. Now, I know this is a shock to the far-right extremist old white men making these decisions, but there are hundreds of reasons why someone might want or need to terminate a pregnancy with medication abortion, and policymakers and judges should not be the ones making decisions for them. If Republicans and anti-abortion extremists have their way, access to mifepristone will be cut in every state, blue or red, even in my district, the Massachusetts 7th, where abortion care is legally protected. Since I've been elected to Congress, I've been proud to lead the Abortion Rights and Access Task Force under our pro-choice caucus, fighting alongside my colleagues for mifepristone access. I'll continue to fight to affirm abortion care as the fundamental human right that it is, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, and I yield.
DEI initiatives destroy morale, decrease recruitment, and potentially violate federal law. These initiatives spread divisive and exclusive ideologies in our federal government workplaces, and taxpayers are left footing the bill. For these reasons, I support the Dismantle DEI Act. H.R. 8706 aims to repeal the federal DEI programs across the federal government.
I'm an original co-sponsor of this bill, and I've noted some of the comments here, and I believe we should take a step back and ask ourselves, you know, what do we seek in our republic regarding individual rights, liberties, and freedoms? I mean, do you believe in those core tenets of our republic or not? We have an opportunity before us with this bill to push back against it. The ranking member mentioned a sweeping attack. Yes, this is what we have suffered. We have suffered as a nation, a sweeping attack against equality. That's exactly what we're fighting against. Another colleague mentioned oppression and degradation. It's exactly what we're pushing back against. This is a bill that eliminates government-sponsored oppression of individual rights, liberties, and freedoms in the land of the free. Freedom of opportunity, not result.
Our founding documents talked about having a nation where we recognize that all people were created equal. Martin Luther King talked about that being a promissory note because, as we know, that had not always been the case and has not always been the case in our country. And it took too long and has taken too long for us to get where we need to go. But he also said that we shouldn't use the results of segregation, and I think we could also say discrimination, as the justification for future segregation or discrimination. That's what this bill seeks to do. It seeks to reverse some of the policies that have, instead of looked at merit or qualifications or the like, and institute a policy where you are hired on those things instead of where the first thing we look at is factors about our character, our personality, our skin color, our sex, whatever the case is in qualifications for a job. And I'll just point out, you know, there's many of these examples, but the Air Force's Diversity and Inclusion Resource Book has recommendations for unconscious bias, race-specific learning, cognitive diversity teaming, general diversity and inclusion and belonging, and it includes a book title called White Rage. This is the kind of things that are going. We should not discriminate at all in our government.
This bill, titled the Dismantling DEI Act, is an utter disgrace. Having sat and read the text in preparation for today's markup, I have yet another example to tell my constituents about the unserious work of the Republican Party. Now, I'll work with anyone serious about progress who wants to center the people who call this country home. This isn't it. Do you all know your history? Do you know American history? The original Constitution counted enslaved individuals as 3/5 of a person. During World War II, the federal government forcibly relocated and incarcerated 110,000 Japanese Americans. The FHA practiced redlining in the 1930s and 60s to deny mortgages to Black Americans, which is why we have a racial wealth gap today. I could go on. The GI Bill, which is supposed to be race neutral, denied access to Black Americans, denying them equal access to education and housing benefits, which is why we do not have generational wealth. Don't talk to me about merit when those Black servicemen fought for our freedoms. And I'd also just like to take a personal note of privilege to say, please keep Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s name out of your mouths. Yes. Your perversion of his words and his mission when his children have asked you to stop invoking his name and perverting his work when he was a proud and unapologetic Black man fighting for equality for Black Americans and all marginalized people. So you all are entitled to your opinions, but not a denial of the facts. But I'm not surprised that you would deny American history. What I am, though, is committed. Committed to speaking truth to power, committed to standing up for marginalized communities and vulnerable people, committed to ensuring that everyone has equal opportunity to buy a house, to work a job, to pursue higher education, and to live in a society that is fair and just. A colleague across the aisle invoked the phrase of, we must do everything to stop government-sponsored oppression. Well, I've just enumerated numerous examples, which is exactly why we have legislation and an executive order to reverse this harm. And that is why I'm committed to opposing this bill and urge my colleagues to do the same.
Gentlelady yields back. We'll go back. We'll rotate sides. Chair recognizes Mr. Perry from Pennsylvania, then we'll recognize Talib after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield my time, such time as he may consume, to the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
I thank my colleague, and I appreciate my Democrat colleague for exemplifying exactly the kind of oppression of freedoms that we're referencing. How about we'll quote whoever we want to quote? How about that's my First Amendment right? That's exactly the kind of baked-in oppression Like, how dare a white Republican quote Martin Luther King? We actually had a congressman say that just now in this committee. Well, thank you, good lady, for once again exemplifying the type of oppression that we stand against. You know I'm right. You know I'm right.
Order, order. Mr. Higgins has the floor.
And we will quote who we please to quote.
A disgrace.
And we will continue to speak freely because now I'm a veteran. That's the country that I serve. That's the Constitution I swore an allegiance to. And that oath has no expiration date. I will fight for it with my last life's blood. For my right to speak freely and yours, good lady. You will never hear me saying, how dare you quote anybody you please to quote. And that exemplifies, America, precisely the type of institutional oppression that my colleague, Mr. Cloud's bill, for which I'm an original co-sponsor, hopes to push back against.
But Mr. Higgins, have you read your own bill? Have you read your
own
own bill? Because it is trying to regulate
Lady.
speech. It is actually
Hey, Ms.
regulating
Stansberry, you're out of
speech.
order. Ms. Stansberry, you're out of order. It's Mr. Perry's time. Chair recognizes Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The work of the FDIC is paramount in supervising our banks, strengthening our financial system, finalizing important regulations like Community Reinvestment Act, Basel III, and in times of economic crisis, FDIC is even more important. It was just last year when folks in my district, the MA 7th, were constantly refreshing the agency's webpage to see if their money was safe after the failure of Silicon Valley Bank. The agency's mission is critical, and there is much work to do. I had initially planned to spend this time discussing regulations and requesting updates from Chair Grunberg on the timeline for finalizing rules that stabilize our financial system. However, after reading the recent report into the FDIC's workplace, the public needs answers on the toxic culture of racial discrimination and misogyny that has taken root and festered at the FDIC. Chair Grunberg, you have failed your staff, people of every walk of life, but especially women employees who have brought their knowledge and their skills to serve at the FDIC, and you have failed the American public who relies on the agency to work productively and to put forth policies that protect consumers from bank malfeasance. Now, I have to just consider the source here when it comes to some of the outrage from my colleagues across the aisle, because these are the same people who seek to actively defund diversity, equity, and inclusion, who denied and undermined the Me Too movement, who voted against the Violence Against Women reauthorization, and who don't want to support finally passing the Equal Rights Amendment. And that is why I am truly disgusted by the fact that you have created an opportunity for Republicans who did all of those things to advance their anti-regulation agenda and to use survivors, which I am one, of abuse as political pawns. Small, ashamed, traumatized, humiliated, alone. These are just a few of the words to describe the intense feelings of sexual harassment and what survivors endure. According to the FDIC's own reporting, more than 80% of harassment complaints resulted in zero discipline. And when there were repercussions, not a single one resulted in removal, reductions in grade or pay, or any discipline more serious than a temporary suspension. I am so tired of white men failing up. This lack of accountability is a shameful, inadequate, and deeply unsatisfactory, and it is re-traumatizing. Chair Grunberg, can you guarantee right now no employee at the FDIC will face any form of intimidation or retaliation for reporting an incident of sexual harassment regardless of confidentiality agreements?
That's our goal, Congresswoman. Yes, the answer to that is yes.
It is shameful that through your inadequate leadership at the helm of this agency that you have fueled calls for your resignation from the political opportunists across this aisle and jeopardized critical regulations pending finalization at your agency. Personally, I do not have confidence that you can continue to lead in this role, because there is a deficit of trust and your credibility has been undermined to lead the FDIC through the changes it needs to affirm the dignity of the survivors of harassment, discrimination, and abuse at your agency. Thank you, and I yield. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record reporting from CNN titled "Right-Wing Media Figures Blame Women in Secret Service and DEI for Security Failure in Trump Shooting."
Without objection to order.
This article quotes members of Congress and others that plainly accuse DEI and the hiring of women as a liability for the Secret Service. Women have been an integral part of the agency since 1971 and are held to the same standards as their male counterparts. To use them as a scapegoat during a time of crisis is shameful and it is dangerously divisive. In fact, based on recent publicly available demographic data of the agency, the largest demographic groups among special agents are white and male. But to right-wing extremists, the truth doesn't matter. The lies they tell to advance their anti-diversity agenda, which is a key theme throughout Project 2025, will only make the American public less safe and more divided. And every day, Director Cheadle, that you fail to give us answers, they are given more oxygen to make their baseless claims that women and people of color are responsible for tragic events. And that is dangerous too. Thank you. And I yield my remaining time to Ranking Member Raskin.
Thank you to the distinguished gentlelady from Massachusetts, and thank you for those trenchant insights. I wanted to make the point that you were making and several of other members were making to bring it into sharp relief here. The very same day that Donald Trump narrowly escaped an assassination attempt, but an honored firefighter was gunned down and killed and other people were injured. There was another mass shooting that day, just several hours later in Birmingham, Alabama. 4 people killed and 10 wounded in a nightclub shooting. And you might think, oh, that's some kind of freakish coincidence. Not at all. We have more than one mass shooting a day in America. They are so commonplace now that they are barely reported in the national news. It's, of course, local news in Birmingham, Alabama, that 4 people were killed and 10 other people were shot and seriously wounded, being treated at the hospital. These things are a nightmare for the families of the victims who've been killed, for the families who have to take care of people who've been seriously injured and wounded. They are a major financial drain, publicly and privately, and yet we allow AR-15s to be purchased with abandon, promiscuously, all over the country. People can just go out and get an assault weapon. And the distinguished gentlelady from Michigan was right. We have a hearing when it affects the President of the United States, but on all the other days of the year, we don't have a hearing about it. And I think it is because of an honest disagreement we have about the Second Amendment. There are some people who think the Second Amendment means you've got the right to arm yourself with whatever weaponry you need to overthrow the government of the United States, and we reject that as a false interpretation of the Second Amendment and a false interpretation of the Constitution. We can ban assault weapons. We did it back in 1994. It dramatically reduced these mass shootings, and when that ban was lifted, the mass shootings went up through the roof again, and we've shown it. And so just like we're demanding real answers and real action from the Secret Service, let us demand real action and real answers from ourselves about the nightmare of mass gun violence, which puts America into a category all its own when you compare us to the countries in the European Union or Canada or other similarly situated countries. There's nothing like what we're going through. So we've got to act on the Secret Service to protect ourselves against political violence, and we've got to act as a Congress to protect ourselves against AR-15 violence in America.